Ladies, gentlemen, and expeditioners of some ages, today it's time for the big guns, or I guess the big swords, or singular sword, just the one. Today we're going to go all in on hitting ridiculous numbers above all else, ending the fight with one or maybe two attacks at most, even for the most difficult fights in the game. If you are unaware, Maelle has access to an absolutely busted skill called Stendhal, with which I hit nearly 1.4 billion damage before hitting even level 90. This is a single target only skill. It does one hit of damage, but it does absolutely ridiculous damage in that one hit, at the cost of removing your shields and giving you the defenseless debuff. A large amount of damage comes from having shields to begin with through our actual Pictos combos, so that is a negative, that's a bad thing, but generally speaking, when you press this button, it is to end the fight, so it doesn't matter how many shields you do or do not have after the fact, because combat is over. Then this has an interesting bugged interaction that seems to be going on with the Medalum Weapon. I've been talking about how good this weapon is for ages, mostly because it lets you start in virtuose stance more than anything else, as that is generally speaking a massive advantage. For this type of setup, however, we want our first actual damage to be from Stendhal itself, which means that it isn't an issue to use a turn to set ourselves into virtuose stance anyways. So you may think that other weapons might end up better as a result of that, right? And I did think that at first, and I tried them. I even found one that could have a higher attack power if I switched my stats over, and so on paper, this is a stronger weapon than Medalum in this setup. But Medalum in actual practice hit essentially twice as hard, double the actual damage, and it was at that moment that I think I finally understood what exactly is bugged about Medalum, which is that, at least for the purposes of Stendhal, it is counting void damage as burning damage. It's counting the level 20 bonus on the weapon, which is double burning damage in virtuose stance, and applying that to the skill as well. You could even argue it might be being read by the game as double damage to burning enemies rather than double burning damage to enemies, which is a very big difference in how the game will calculate your damage for a skill like this. So that makes this weapon completely irreplaceable, and a major part of why we're able to hit the numbers that we do. If this bug eventually gets fixed, then it is worth noting that you would instead want to change this same setup over to using the Secarum weapon, which hits higher attack power on paper if you have the right stats for it, and also lets you pierce shields as an extra bonus. The Medalum weapon then, just to make sure that you actually know how to get it, comes from either using Maelle to win the Gestural Arena within the story of Act 1, or by beating Golgra with Maelle in a duel, also in the Gestural Village. That said, I am getting a little bit ahead of myself here. The goal today is to make Maelle into a walking nuclear bomb. We accomplish this with some buffing supports from allies as well, and the setup is essentially a mix of my last two builds combined together and refined to work around the specific skills that we want to use today, combining auto death and breaking death functionality and the support benefits from Sciel, the addition of Verso as an extra support, and then Maelle herself doing all of the actual heavy lifting. That said, let's start by breaking down everything that you want to have on Maelle herself. We've already talked about weapons, so let's move on to skills. We went over Stendhal and why you would want to work around that as your main single target damage option, but this doesn't help when you are trying to do multi-target, or if the enemy has multiple phases, as dropping off all of your shields is actually a really big damage loss because of our Lumina abilities. So we always want to save Stendhal to be the last attack that you use in combat, the final action. Our secondary attack, our skill that we'll want to use outside of that then, is Phantom Strike. This is 4 hits of heavy void damage that also gives 35% of a gradient charge as a bonus. We only care about the skill and the damage, and from what I can tell, this skill also gets the double damage scaling when used with Medalum as a weapon as opposed to any other weapon in otherwise identical scenarios. It won't hit the insane numbers that Stendhal does, but depending on the RNG side of things, I've had it hit for nearly 20 million on a hit. It is a 4-hit combo, and it can hit all targets, so that is of course absolutely nasty. The final important skill then is Last Chance. What this does is set your health to 1, but refill your AP entirely up to 9. It sets you to virtuose stance, and this is our enabler. This lets us set up for our massive burst of damage, and it lets us continue to set up on following turns if it happens to last that long. We are playing low health for the damage boost from Pictos, and we use this to manually set ourselves there. As well, this gives us a way to set up for big damage even outside of our first damage turn too. Then the rest of your skill slots are pretty much just up to personal choice, and then we have our Pictos and our Lumina abilities as well. And of course, if you want to hit the exact numbers that I'm hitting, you need to have at least around 200 Lumina points, as all of my equipped Pictos personally are being used as stat sticks just to pump my speed up more than anything else. So you could easily save up to like 80 Luminas just by moving these out and moving some of the Lumina abilities I have active over to being Pictos instead. That say, my Pictos are sort of irrelevant, I just use them for the stats, nothing else. As for the actual Lumina abilities then, there is a lot going on to make this hit what it does, so I'll try not to spend too long on each one. At Death's Door is the reason that we want to play this as a low health build. It gives us 50% more damage if we are at 10% health or lower. You can technically play this build without treating it as a low health setup if you replace Last Chance with Mezzo Forte, but if you play it with low health, you can win pretty much any combat before the enemy gets to take a single turn. Whereas if you start to concede damage to gain tankiness, you can actually make it more dangerous to play because you'll let the enemy live long enough to potentially take their turn. So while it's possible to play as a non-low health build, I don't recommend it for this one specifically. Then we have the Augmented First Strike effect, which gives you increased damage to your first hit of combat. Burn Affinity is increased damage against burning enemies, and we will be automatically setting our enemies on fire with burn stacks from our other allies. Cheater, specifically, is a really strong Pictos that lets you take 2 turns in a row anytime that you have your turn. You always want this on every character that you can fit it on. Combo Attack 2 is just from our Pictos, it does not matter to the build at all, we won't be using base attack. Confident Fighter is a damage increase, but you can't be healed while you have the effect active, which is honestly fine because we're playing it as a low health build anyways. We don't want to be healed. Critical Moment is 50% increased crit chance if health is below 30%, and because of this we just go above 100% crit chance, which means that we will always crit, and that is a 50% bonus to our damage. We've also got Empowering Parry as well, which is that each successful parry will increase your damage by 5%. Honestly, this won't get used very often, it won't get activated pretty much ever because of the actual damage output if you've got everything else that I've got here too, but on the off chance your enemy gets to attack you, this will increase your damage the next turn afterwards. Energy Master then is generically useful but not particularly specific to this setup. You don't need it, but if combat goes more than a few turns for whatever reason, you will be happy if you have this. It's not required to reach the numbers that I do, so you don't need it, but it is a nice thing to have. First Offensive increases your damage of the first hit dealt and taken each combat, so another damage bonus for our first hit, which is part of why we ideally want Stendhal to be our first hit with Maelle, unless it's not going to end the combat for whatever reason. First Strike just ensures that you will always go before the enemy regardless of your speed stat, so it is pretty much a must-have at that cost. Glass Cannon is a damage increase, but also an increase to your damage taken. We're playing at 1 HP anyway, so this is purely a bonus. Greater Powerful increases the effect of the powerful buff when we get it to ourselves. Immaculate gives us bonus damage until the first hit you receive each combat, and again our goal is to end combat before you even can take a hit, not to mention whether you do or not. In Medias Res is +3 shields on battle start but half max health. We're playing this as a 1 HP build, so the extra shields are nice, but also we turn shields into damage, and because we're playing at 1 health, the fact that it halves our maximum health doesn't matter at all. That isn't really a negative. Inverted Affinity applies the inverted debuff to ourselves, which makes it so any healing would damage us instead, but it also gives us 50% increased damage while we have this debuff, which is a very large increase, and this also ends up getting us more damage from another buff later on too. We then have Marking Shots and Rewarding Mark just sort of as a bonus for emergency situations. Again, if combat lasts more than a couple of turns for whatever reason, if you end up in a situation where you just don't have enough AP to use your powerful skills, these are a good way to get more AP or to spend your AP before using Last Chance. Then we of course have Painted Power. This is a requirement on every single character that you play with in this game once you have unlocked it at the start of Act 3. We also have Powered Attack, and this increases the damage of any hit that you do at the cost of 1 AP if you have it at the time. This is absolutely perfect for the skills that we're using. When we use Stendhal, that is an 8 AP cost skill, we'll be using it with 9 AP because we use it after Last Chance, and that means 8 AP for the skill, plus 1 AP for this 20% boost here. We also have it work perfectly for Phantom Strike as well, because Phantom Strike is 4 hits hits, which means 4 opportunities to trigger this effect. It costs 7 AP. Again, we'll be casting it with 9 AP, so you get the first 2 hits, getting a bonus from this effect, but then also if you're hitting a marked enemy, which oftentimes you will be in this setup, you will gain more AP because of rewarding mark that we talked about earlier, so you can have it affect every single hit of Phantom Strike as well. Then we also have Powerful Shield, which is a very important one. 10% increased damage per shield point on yourself. We have 9 shield points when we're up and running, and that is a 90% damage increase. Then we have Roulette as well, and this is a 50% chance to deal double damage and a 50% chance to deal half damage. On average, this is a 25% damage increase, but of course, when you hit the 200% damage proc, that's when you hit the really absolutely insane numbers that you'll see on screen in this footage. Then after that, we've got Shield Affinity, and this is just a nice flat damage increase while you have shields, but it makes it so when you receive any damage, you will always lose all of your shields. This, however, isn't a big deal because 1, we're not going to get hit by the enemy before combat is over if everything is going right, and 2, using Stendhal removes all of your shields, so we have multiple reasons why that's not even really a negative to have, and this is basically just a nice bit of bonus damage. Then we have Solo Fighter, and this is just sort of an emergency, a backup, in case your 2 allies happen to die while you are playing this playstyle, but it's not an important part of this, it just costs 1 Lumina point, so you might as well. Then we've got Stun Boost, which is a 30% increase to damage against stunned targets. Enemies will be broken and stunned before we do our big hit in this setup, so the big hit will have a 30% damage increase because of this. Then we've got the Tainted effect, which gives you increased damage for each status effect on yourself, which seems to only include negative statuses, and we have one of those, which is Inverted from Inverted Affinity, but that does mean that we get an extra 15% damage because of that from this combo. Then we've got Teamwork, which gives us 10% increased damage while all of our allies are alive, which should be the case before you do any important hits, and then Warming Up. This is a 5% increase to your damage per turn that passes. It can stack up to 5 times. Generally speaking, your big damage with Maelle in this build will be done on her 3rd turn, which means that you will have multiple increases from this effect, which is of course why we use it. As for the attributes on Maelle, then you want to go 99 agility first to max out your speed, then 99 might for damage increase, and then defense is the secondary scaling stat on Medalum, so that's why you want to go in that as your 3rd stat. That does it for her, so now let's move on and talk about Sciel, whose entire purpose is to apply buffs and debuffs by dying at the start of the fight, then reviving, and then casting support skills to enable Maelle to be more powerful. Her weapon doesn't really matter here, so use whatever you want, but her skills sorta do, only 2 of them specifically, which are Fortune's Fury, which doubles the damage that an ally does on their next turn, and Intervention, which makes a targeted ally essentially steal Sciel's turn to gain a bonus turn. So essentially the way that you want to use this is use Sciel's Fortune Fury on her 1st turn, then the Cheater Pictos, which you can grab, gives her a 2nd turn, and then you can use Intervention afterward to swap to an ally, triggering their bonus damage turn. It will then treat it as that ally's turn, and then if they also have Cheater active, it will give them a 2nd turn after that too. So this just increases your turn economy an insane amount as long as Sciel isn't your actual main damage dealer herself. The way that we use this in combat generally is just to get back to Maelle's strong turn sooner, but you can also use it on Verso depending on the turn order that you get with your stats if that works out to being more effective. The important part, however, is just making sure that Maelle gets to have her big damage turn before the enemy lose their break stun debuff. As for the Pictos and Lumina on Sciel, you want to use Pictos that just match the effects that we want anyways to sort of make our Lumina point costs more efficient so we can have more skills with less requirements. And as for the actual list of Pictos and Lumina, the really properly important ones are Auto Death over here, which makes you die at the start of combat, Breaking Death, which fills the enemy's break bar when you die, which will then happen at the start of combat, Burning Death, which applies 3 burn stacks to enemies when you die, which will then happen at the start of combat, Cheater for the 2nd turn effect, of course, as well. Energizing Death is excessive, you don't really need that for Maelle, but it's just 5 points and we're dying anyway, so it's fun to have here anyways. We've got all the energizing starts and energizing turns with Energy Master here, specifically to allow you to use Fortune's Fury into Intervention back to back, because otherwise you just wouldn't have the AP to be able to use both of those one turn after the other. Then we have Protecting Death as well as a Lumina, and this makes it so when you die, you will apply Shell to your allies. Powerful on Shell makes it so when you apply Shell to allies, you will also apply Powerful to them. We've got Greater Powerful, which increases the damage bonus that allies get when you apply Powerful to them. We also have Rush on Powerful, which applies the Rush buff when we apply Powerful, which is a massive speed increase. We have Greater Rush to increase the amount of speed that Rush applies as well. And the last real required ones then are Second Chance, which is how you revive after the auto death at the start of battle. You die, and then this just brings you back to life right at the beginning. Then you also have Shielding Death, which is on death, allies gain 3 shield points, and this is how we get Maelle to 9 shields. We've got 2 allies with this that auto die at the start of combat for 6 shields, and then in Medias Res, which we went over earlier, for an extra 3 shields on Maelle. Everything else here is just sort of a bonus. It's extra, it's things that boost her damage a little bit, or boost her survivability, but again, she's not the source of damage in this build, that's not her purpose, so those are just sort of extra. As for attributes, these don't really matter for her in our setup here, so full in on agility for turn order, as that's the important part, and then it's pretty much just personal choice after that. Moving on to Verso then, he is also a support, but as a sort of middle ground, because we're making use of his weapon, the Sciel weapon. This drops from the Chromatic Greatsword Cultist in Serene in Act 2. The main thing that you're after here is the level 4 bonus, which is that the bonus damage from perfection ranks now apply to all allies at half value, but no longer affect Verso himself. Then the level 10 bonus that increases the speed of perfection gain while powerful, which I don't even have active in my setup or footage, but if you want to add that in and make it generate perfection even faster, make sure to use the Powerful Revive Pictos, which gives Verso the powerful buff for 3 turns after he revives from Second Chance. That said, as far as skills, the only one that you really need here is Phantom Stars specifically, which is our way to apply Break to the entire room in one go. This costs 9 AP by default, 5 AP when you're in S rank. As for Pictos and Lumina effect, same concept as Sciel for the actual Pictos, focus on Lumina abilities that you would want to get anyways, as the stats will not be important for how we are using Verso here. Then for the actual setup that I've got on him, it's the same sort of setup of auto death effects from Sciel as well, so mostly similar Luminas there, but Verso is also built with Burning Break, which applies burn stacks to a target after he breaks them, because he is the one that we're using to break enemies. We have Combo Attack 1 and Combo Attack 2, and this is mostly to synergize with Energizing Attack to give us a bunch of extra AP when we use our base attack, which we will be using occasionally, and this stacks even further with Energy Master to just let you just fully refill your AP bar just with your basic attack, simple as that. Then I've also got him with Energizing Starts and Energizing Turn as well, just for more energy management, and the main reason for this is so that it lets us use lots of free aim shots, because free aim shots are the fastest, easiest way to build perfection rank, so being able to fire off a whole load of them as much as you can will get you to maximum perfection rank as quickly as possible. Then we have Marking Break, because we're going to be breaking the enemies with Verso, which lets us apply Mark on Break to help increase the damage that Maelle does with her next hit. And this sort of decides the order of what we do with our turns, because we want to leave the enemies marked for Maelle's turn, which will happen afterwards. Then we also have Exposing Attack, which makes your base attack apply defenseless for 1 turn, increasing the damage that Maelle will do to them, as well as, of course, Greater Defenseless to increase the actual effect of the defenseless debuff. And then, of course, we have Marking Shots and Rewarding Mark, just as another way to add to our engine of lots of free aim shots before we do stuff to help increase our perfection rank nice and quickly. As for his attributes as well, same again for the Sciel here, basically, as he's being used to make Sciel stronger, so you want to again max out agility for turn order purposes, but then his actual damage output is pretty irrelevant in comparison to Maelle in this build, so the rest of the attributes are completely unimportant. And with that, you now know how to put the full setup together, so now let's quickly go over the sort of order of combat, how you actually want to make this happen. Maelle will go first, use Last Chance to skip the turn while staying in Virtuose stance, and go up to 9 AP. The Cheater effect will trigger for a bonus turn, so then just use Last Chance again to move it along. Then you'll have Verso's turn, shoot the hell out of the priority enemy until you run out of AP. Then use your base attack against them. This will apply Greater Defenseless, and if you have my AP generation setup, this will then also put you back to 9 AP. If you are S rank perfection already, then just pop off your shots until you go down to 5 AP and then use Phantom Stars. If you are not S rank before this, then just use Phantom Stars straight up for 9 AP. You don't lose that much anyways, honestly. This will cause Break, on all enemies and also apply mark to them as well. That said, depending on RNG and whether you have all the things that I do or not, as long as you can get to A rank before Maelle's turn, you're doing pretty good. S rank is just the cherry on top. Then you'll have Sciel's turn. If you have 9 AP on turn start, you can start by using Fortune's Fury on Maelle for 5 AP, which will double the damage she does on her next turn. Then the Cheater Pictos will proc a bonus turn, and you should have enough AP left over for Intervention to then hand it back to Maelle while the enemies are still stunned for a bonus turn. If there is only one target and no second phase to the fight, this is when you would use Stendhal to hit for absolutely obscene damage numbers. Otherwise, use Phantom Strike and still hit for insane damage, just not quite as much. From here, combat will most likely be over most often, but if it continues for whatever reason, you want to sort of repeat this loop, with the main goal just being to get Maelle back into Virtuose stance and then use one of our other 2 strong skills depending on the state of the enemy. And that's pretty much it. That does it for today then, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this route to hitting straight up redonkulous numbers in Clair Obscur Expedition 33. These are the highest I've been able to reach so far myself, and if you're looking for big numbers, I hope you enjoy using this for yourself too. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.